Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
I do want to introduce our presenter, Victoria Hinojosa. So Victoria Hinojosa is currently an ESL instructor at Lone Star College. She served as a career navigator with Workforce Solutions in the Houston-Galveston region since 2019. She's a graduate of Texas State University with a bachelor's degree in mass communications, and she is passionate about helping people discover how their natural talents and interests can lead to a rewarding career. She spent 12 years assisting students in middle schools, high schools, colleges, and adult education and literacy programs navigate through the career exploration and job preparation process. So in addition, she coordinates a faith-based ESL program in Katy, Texas. She is an enthusiastic facilitator who believes if you become who you are intended to be, you'll set the world on fire.
So welcome to Workforce Wednesday. Today's topic is bad to the bone strategies for dealing with exceptionally bad bosses. And like Olga said, my name is Victoria Hinojosa, and it's a pleasure to be here once again. Let's get started. I like this quote. According to many sources, a bad boss is also the #1 reason why employees quit their jobs. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is maybe giving you some strategies to help your students so that don't find themselves in that position, that maybe they can learn how to communicate better with this boss that's giving them some difficulty. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second. So the objectives for today, we're going to discuss some of the key characteristics of a toxic boss, learn about 2 main leadership styles and how those impact their employees, and then give practical advice to guide students dealing with bad bosses. So first off, bad bosses can run the gamut from bullies to micromanagers to poor communicators to poor decision makers. Sometimes what makes a bad boss is their inability to lead. One definition that I found in my research came from an article that I read called 7 Red Flags of a Toxic Boss. And in it, it said that some of the other qualities or characteristics of a toxic leader is that they are self-centered, they're not ethical, they demonstrate incompetence and emotional volatility. So with that being said, what are some of the characteristics that you've encountered with toxic bosses? Here is a list that I've compiled of the 16 top toxic boss behaviors. Take a look at these, because I think that from my research, these are very common across the board. This is what people talk about as being toxic boss behaviors. If they're critical, take credit for other people's work, but blame others for their mistakes, don't respect their team, they play favorites, they don't listen or won't accept feedback, disengage, lack initiative, shows hostility, can be unfriendly, possess poor leadership skills, poor communication skills, they prefer to work alone, they don't include the team, they're micromanagers, they can be disrespectful, too demanding, or unhelpful. So when I was doing the research for this webinar, I saw basically the same thing. Okay, here are a list of the toxic behaviors, and here's how you can deal with them at work. But when I dug a little bit deeper, I found this really great book called Surrounded by Bad Bosses and Lazy Employees, or How to Deal with Idiots at Work. This book is written by best-selling author Thomas Erickson, who has a complete series. I think he's got 7 books on how to deal with idiots or surrounded by idiots. And so some of the other books are Surrounded by Idiots, Surrounded by Psychopaths, Surrounded by Narcissists, and another one I found was Surrounded by Setbacks. Throughout all these books, he talks about behavior patterns and how these behavior patterns influence how we communicate and lead. We talked about what a bad boss may look like. So let's actually drill down a little bit further and talk about what is a boss. Really, a boss is just a job title. It's a role to be fulfilled. It's a slot, a little square in the organization's hierarchy. So basically, it's what you are. Now, a boss does have a set of responsibilities and mandates that they have to fulfill. So they are responsible for things like the budget, achieving goals, or accomplishing projects and tasks. It's a task, it's a role, it's a job. And why that's important is because being a boss is not a behavior. Now, a leader, however, is a little bit more complicated and a lot more difficult to achieve, because to be a successful leader, this implies that you're good at handling people, that you can motivate them to do what you need them to do or to achieve those goals that you've set for your department as the boss. And leadership is more of what you do than what you are. Leaders succeed by setting the example, by acting in a professional manner. In a perfect world, it'd be great if our boss is in fact a leader, but that doesn't always happen, as we know. And here's a great quote that came from Erikson's book. So the boss is that person I must follow. The leader is the person I want to follow. And I think that's a great distinction. So for bosses who want to become effective leaders, they must become good communicators. In order for that to happen, bosses must learn to understand other people. Bad bosses typically have poor communication skills and base everything on their own personal worldview. They don't listen, or they talk about themselves too much, and they don't take into consideration the opinion or the ideas of their team. Sometimes they do behave badly, and we've seen a list of bad behaviors. Sometimes they're mean, sometimes they're demeaning, sometimes they can be just very direct, or sometimes they can be just downright despotic. But one of the biggest mistakes that a bad boss makes is to rule from their own personal point of view instead of trying to understand the staff's point of view. So in order to be accepted in their leadership role, a boss really needs to learn how you, the employee, functions and how to reach you. They need to know who you are. And this is a big distinction that Erikson makes in the book. He also states that leadership is a process of communication. It is probably one of the most important skills bosses can have, is that ability to communicate with their staff. So to explain behavior and the differences in behavior, which I think is the fundamental problem that we have personality traits, conflicting personality traits that happen in the workplace, and people just don't know how to deal with that. So there's a personality model that Erikson uses in his books to talk about the differences in behavior. He uses this DISC personality model. It's a nice framework. It was developed by Dr. William Marston, who is a psychologist. He created this framework to describe human behavior based on 4 personality traits. And those traits are: D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S is steadiness, and C stands for conscientiousness. But before we get into the details or the qualities and characteristics of these 4 personality traits, I want to look at 2 important forces that drive all the personality types. So the first one is task-oriented versus relationship-oriented. It's important if you're trying to understand or communicate with your boss, it's really going to be important for you to understand, number one, what are you? Are you relationship-oriented? And if so, is your boss relationship-oriented or is your boss task-oriented? The other thing that you want to understand about yourself and your boss is, are you introverted or are you extroverted? Neither one of these are right or wrong, but what's important to understand is that in regards to task oriented versus relationship oriented, their focuses are very different. Just as introverts and extroverts have different ways of processing information and communicating or rejuvenating their energy, when you look at task oriented versus relationship oriented, it's a different mindset altogether. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So, task oriented bosses, the advantage is they don't need a lot of support to get their job done. Of course, they're very focused on the task. It's all about the job and what needs to get done. They don't get bogged down in emotional issues. They don't like to focus on relationship oriented issues. They're there to do a job and they will steam ahead. So, if you want a job done, your task oriented people are the right ones. Now, the disadvantages to this function or this behavior is that they can neglect to consider the opinions and the attitudes of their team members. And you, as a team, risk that the boss will just move forward without considering your input. And as a result, you're prone to a lot of conflict. The boss is going to be prone to a lot of conflict because people are, they might get a little disgruntled that their opinions don't matter, or they don't know how to deal with a boss that's pretty direct. So now let's juxtapose this to a relationship oriented boss. Now, these folks are more interested in relationships and interactions between people rather than concrete tasks. This does not mean that they don't get their work done. On the contrary, to be successful on a team, they need to know their employees. So, like I said earlier, these guys are going to be more focused on communication and relationship building. It's important for a relationship oriented boss to know who their employee is as much as they possibly can, to get a fairly good understanding about their employees or their colleagues in order to build that team and get the job done. So the advantages here, they are naturally inclined to listen to the opinions and ideas of their team members. They're more likely to sway their colleagues. They're very persuasive and they can think through ideas before starting a project. Now, the disadvantages are that they may play favorites. They have a tendency to listen to the people they like instead of the people who are actually the subject matter experts. Now, and they dislike conflict. They are more about either positive attitude or stability. So when conflict arises, they're not comfortable. If you have a team member who is not performing well, it may be difficult for these bosses then to confront that team member and give negative feedback. They prefer to have a positive atmosphere, and sometimes that means that the job will suffer. Based on what we've just read or we've just seen, who among you feel like you're more task oriented and who among you feel like you're relationship oriented? I'm very relationship oriented. So without taking the test, you could probably gain which one you are. Now, for me, I am definitely relationship oriented. In one of my jobs, I was on a team that was also very relationship oriented. Our bosses were all relationship oriented. And then one day we get this new boss who, guess what, is task oriented. It was a complete slap in the face because the way we did business, the way we communicated with each other, we could not communicate with our task oriented boss the same way. It was very difficult when you have someone who's task oriented. Again, they don't care about the relationships. They're here to do a job. So they can be very direct. They can come across as very harsh, sometimes condescending. But you, as a relationship, now when I look back in hindsight, I laugh because my gut instinct was, I need to understand this person better. I don't understand. How come every time I talk, I feel like this person makes a face at me? What's going on here? How do I reach this person? What can I do? I need to understand this person better, which is so completely a relationship oriented mindset. Now, let's take a look at extroverted bosses versus introverted bosses. So, according to Erickson, this dimension is more complicated. It's easy for things to go very wrong between the two because, again, it's a whole nother way of thinking, of processing, and just coming about how you do things, how you behave. So extroverts are more outgoing than introspective, extroverts are susceptible to impressions coming from outside of themselves. And this makes some of them very action oriented and result oriented rather than their introverted counterparts. They have a tendency to move from thought to action quickly and devote less time to reflection. Their energy is directed outwards towards other people and the world around them. And this leads to a propensity for diversity of thought, as well as an understanding that they will gain their strength from the outer world. This is why they tend to surround themselves with people. Their energy comes from activity and thinking up new ideas. They do not like being alone. Being alone bores them and drains their energy. I learned this the hard way. I'm also an extreme extrovert, and one summer I just took a week off from vacation. I didn't go anywhere. It was a staycation, and I was so bored. I was so depressed. I ended up spending the entire week on my couch watching television. It was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. So I learned that I really cannot be alone that long, or else I start to decline. I have to be energized by being around other people. And so the other thing that is relative to extroverts is they enjoy discussing their ideas with other people. They prefer to express themselves in speech and instead of writing. And many have a tendency to process their thoughts out loud. I know there's a saying that extroverts tend to speak in order to think, whereas introverts tend to think so that they can speak. Lastly, experiences are important to extroverts, otherwise, they will not stay engaged. The advantages to an extrovert boss, as you could see, is that they rarely waste time analyzing data and paying too much attention to the people or the drama around them or the politics around them. They have very strong egos, they're confident, they quickly decide and express their opinions, and this makes them natural decision makers. They also don't have a problem taking risks. They're usually unafraid and dare to make a place for themselves among larger groups of people. Since they're influenced by impressions from outside themselves, they get a lot of new ideas. Now, the disadvantages are that sometimes their rapidity in making decisions can cause issues. They can get it wrong. However, because these bosses tend to be dynamic, they can stand up for their ideas even though they have been proven wrong. They can have big egos that take up too much space and forget to listen to the opinions of others. They may have a tendency to think that their ideas are the only good ones. Okay, so now let's take a look at our introverted bosses. Introverts are introspective rather than outgoing. They have a strong interior life. There's a lot going on under the surface. They have a wait and see attitude and always think twice before acting. They spend a lot of time collecting information when a major decision needs to be made. They believe the path to the decision is more important than the decision itself. They gain their energy by withdrawing and being inside their own heads, and they need the solitude to rejuvenate their energy. Dragging an introvert to the dance floor or to a night of parties is going to be very stressful for them and will only drain them of their energy. They direct their energy inwards into their own world. So they require a lot of peace and quiet to reflect and process their ideas, and they can be very circumspect. Their ideas come from reflection rather than inspiration. The written word is more valuable to them when giving and receiving information, and they may not take part in a discussion, but they will email you with their thoughts afterwards. So the advantages are that they're not careless about anything. They like to be thorough, which means their responses are likely to be well thought out. It's not a problem for them to bide their time, wait and see, and let others do their work without interruptions. They're also seen as humble and rarely express a demand without good reason. So the disadvantages to introverts are that they take too long to make a decision. They will often sit through a meeting without sharing their opinions. And for an extroverted staff, they take the silence as approval, which is not the case. It may mean that the introvert boss is not comfortable speaking at that time, or they just need more time to process and think through the proposals. Who is an extrovert and who is an introvert? From those two dimensions that we just talked about, we get 4 personality types. So the first one is red behavior, which is dominant. Red behavior is all about how you approach problems and deal with challenges. Yellow behavior is how you cooperate with and influence people. And then green behavior is how you respond to change. Blue behavior is how you respond to rules and regulations. So reds, like we said, are task-oriented extroverts who are driven to deal with problems and difficult challenges. The tougher the demand, the better they perform. They are suspicious of things that run too smoothly because work should be a challenge for them, something that requires real effort. A red probably came up with the slogan, no pain, no gain. They like speed, they like action and grit. And while reds like doing, yellow, on the other hand, are relationship oriented and extroverted, and they're all about interacting. So these folks like to convince everyone else to think and feel the same way that they do. They're very persuasive. They have woo. I don't know if you know about that, but woo is that ability to woo other people to persuade them your way. They can't leave the room unless everyone agrees, and they are eternal optimists. The sun always shines for the extroverts, even in a hurricane. Now, they also like it when things move quickly. Let's take a look at green. So, green are relationship oriented, but extroverts. And for them, it's all about stability. Bosses with a lot of green do not like change. Even if the changes are necessary, greens will look upon the change with suspicion. Some of their mottos are, it was better before, you know what you have and not what you get. The grass is not always greener on the other side. The new ideas are met with resistance and prefer things to remain the way they are. Now, the last behavior is blue. So they are task-oriented, introverted, and are about appreciating rules and regulations. They go by the book and always know the right thing to do. This type will actually read the directions and do so in 3 languages just to get a little more context before attempting to assemble their bookshelves from IKEA. Now, these 4 attitudes, with their orientation towards task or relationships and differences in introversion and extroversion, lead to unique behaviors. Each one of these 4 attitudes possess unique qualities and characteristics that help identify the color. So we know that human beings are complex people, complex beings, and as a result, we may not just be one color, but a combination of 2 or 3. But in the interest of time, just to give you an overview, we're going to go with what we think is our dominant. So let's just take a look at some of the traits of the dominant traits of red. So these people are energetic, ambitious, strong-willed, problem solver, pioneer, assertive, decisive, innovative. They want control. They're convincing, goal-oriented, powerful, result-oriented, takes initiative, fast-paced, intensive, opinionated, direct, independent, impatient, and volatile. And so I bolded some of the ones that are considered to be a little bit more negative traits. And so moving quickly, let's go into yellow, influence traits. So these people are talkative, they're enthusiastic, persuasive, creative, optimistic, sociable, spontaneous, charismatic, charming, self-absorbed, sensitive, adaptable, stimulating, encouraging, communicative, flexible, open, relationship-oriented, imaginative, and easygoing. And then here are the traits and qualities of our green people, our steadiness folks. They're very patient, relaxed, restrained, reliable, calm, loyal, unassuming, understanding, thorough, secure, discreet, supportive, good listeners. They're helpful, they're doers, they have a lot of stamina, they have a wait and see attitude, they're considerate, but they hide their feelings, and they're thoughtful and friendly. And then last, you have your blue behavior traits, and these folks are thorough, systematic. They can be distant, kind of cold, but they're correct, they're conventional, and objective, structured, investigative, perfectionist. They need time because they are reflective, methodical. They seek the facts, they're discerning, they examine, they follow the rules, they're logical, inquisitive, compliant, circumspect, and reserved. What do you think is your dominant color? So just to give you a real quick example of how these personalities work together, there's an example that Erikson gives in his book. He says that when a blue person approaches an elevator, he or she will silently calculate the weight of every person on that elevator to determine if they meet the maximum weight load or if they're still under it, and may actually opt to get off the elevator if the math does not check out. Whereas red goes straight into the elevator, presses the button repeatedly, hoping that that will make the elevator go faster. Green actually uses that open door button to allow people time to enter, whereas yellow sees the elevator as an opportunity to catch up with people that they have not seen in a while. And they will even hold the elevator door open to continue a conversation with someone who is not riding the elevator. So that kind of helps you give an idea of how different these personalities are. Now let's move into strategies. Now that we understand who we are and how we see the world and how we interact, let's take a look at how to deal with strategies with a boss and their bad behavior, especially if they're opposite to you in some way, because you will find conflict. First of all, I've got a list of some strategies that you can share with your students. Number one is take responsibility for communication. We all have a responsibility to ensure good communication. I said in the beginning that leadership is a process of communication, but your leader may not be good in this area or maybe too absorbed in projects and details that they're not communicating effectively. So now the burden becomes yours, and you need to step up, or we all should step up and take initiative in this area. Because if you place all the responsibility on the boss, then you are, in a sense, victimizing yourself. You're giving your power away. So reclaim that power and step up and go and be the first one to communicate with the boss. We just went over the different orientations and learned the different task-oriented bosses are not always good at communication or listening. So don't be afraid to speak up. Tell your boss what it is that you need from management in order to do your job well. For example, if you're yellow and you're dealing with a red boss, yellow is extroverted, but they're also very talkative. They're very relationship oriented. And you need to go talk to your red boss. If you understand that this person just needs the facts, they just need to know what is it that I need, I can be very straightforward and direct with them. I don't have to persuade them. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of yellows make with task-oriented people, is that they're trying to always persuade them. They feel like they have to present all the arguments before they get to the final point, which is just simply, hey, I need a better computer, and this is why. Learn how to manage your boss. Again, I'm going to give you some strategies on how to manage your boss based on their weaknesses. You can learn how to kind of identify what their why is, learn what their preferences are, try to adapt to them, because we can adapt. We can support their success by working around their weaknesses. Once you understand, oh, okay, they're task oriented, I'm relationship oriented, just need to be direct. I need to focus on exactly what I need, be short, sweet, and to the point. Okay, I can work with this. That makes more sense. And when you illustrate that to your students, I think that they'll be able to understand how to make that happen for them. Another one is don't be a target. Do the work. Make sure you get your work done. That's another thing. Take the high road. Your personal brand is writing on it. So that means don't gossip, don't get drawn in, don't be intimidated by a bully, stand tall. I know that's difficult, but once you understand that a lot of times those bullies can be the red and sometimes the yellow folks, then what you understand about them is just be direct, stand your ground. And when you understand that reds also like conflict, they thrive in conflict, don't be afraid to push back. It's going to be okay. And then the other big thing that you want to tell your students to do is document everything. When you are documenting stuff, it's a great idea to document this happened on this date. This is what occurred. This was the reaction. This is what I dealt with. At some point, you'll start to realize that maybe this isn't happening as often as I thought it was. Maybe you talk over with some of your colleagues and to see, like, are you having these same issues with the boss that I'm having? Now, if it is true and it is perpetual, then of course, now you have the documentation and the evidence that you can then present to HR. So I think documenting everything is a really great strategy to present to your students because it helps them to reflect as well as provides evidence when they do need to report this or even confront their boss and say, look, I'm seeing this behavior from you. What can we do about it? I want to talk about some strategies for managing your red boss. So, according to Erickson, the number of red bosses increases the higher up the ladder you go. That does not mean that red bosses are better. It just means that based on their qualities and their characteristics, it makes sense that these go-getters who are very driven to succeed, they're going to push themselves up the ladder. The thing you have to remember about red bosses is that they are task oriented, which compels them to be more objective. This means that they set emotions aside. They are decision makers. They do not get bogged down in the data. They always keep things moving. You won't have time to be bored with a red boss because they're always setting deadlines and moving things along. They will always state what they're thinking and make their direction clear. Red bosses do not suffer opposition. They really don't care if everybody is on the same page or not. It doesn't matter to them. They're the boss. They're going to go forward with their idea. That means that they're not always the best about considering other people's opinions or ideas. A lot of times, these red bosses, once they have an idea in their head and they think they're right, they will move forward with it. But the nice thing about red bosses is because they're not afraid of opposition or confrontation, they actually gain energy from confrontation and opposition. That means that they're always ready for battle. They can take a punch. They can take it. Now, if your red boss is actually a good leader, then they will protect their team and they will have their team's back and you will have a bulldog on your side. If you've got a really good red boss, then you know that they're going to be in your corner if they're really good leaders. Again, some of the hallmarks of the red boss is that they're fast-paced, impatient, direct, opinionated, strong-willed, intense. They want control. They're result-oriented, and they can be volatile when things don't go their way. So what are some strategies for this? Act a little bit red yourself. Try to stick strictly to the point. Remember that your red bosses are impatient. They're very busy. Their minds are constantly on the go. So they really don't tolerate distractions that are going to eat up their time or conversations that are going to eat up their time. They want you to be efficient. So don't waste their time. Make yourself understood. Be efficient and don't take things personally. So what does all that mean? Really, don't waste their time. Be direct and state what it is that you want. So if there's a problem, you want to make sure that you're not wasting their time. Come out and say, hey, this is what's happened. It failed. Here's why. And be very brief. Just tell them what they need to know. It failed because we weren't well prepared or the research was wrong. The data was wrong. This is what happened. Make yourself understood. Always start with the final point you're trying to make. Remember, if they're direct, you can be direct. You can state what it is that you want and don't be afraid to push back. The next one is be efficient. Being efficient means that you're organized. You come to a meeting prepared. If you need to have documentation to make your point, or maybe you were given a certain amount of time, 30 minutes to make your presentation, and then you're going to cover points A, B, and C. Make sure you cover points A, B, and C within that time frame of 30 minutes. They appreciate that. Again, time is money for these people. When I say be efficient, be organized. Doesn't mean that you have to have a clean desk. It's not about appearances for them. If you're unorganized, then you're having to flip through pages to find what it is that you're trying to speak on. That's wasting time for them. So they like people who are efficient, who can get down to business immediately, take care of it. And again, the shorter the meeting, the better for a red. And lastly, don't take things personally. They do have a bark. They can come at you with a bark. And sometimes I have come across this where people think that reds think that they're being very direct, but sometimes they come across as rude. You might want to document that rude behavior and then come to them later, be very direct and be very confident and say, listen, I feel like your behavior towards me is rude. And here's where I'm seeing it. This happened, this happened, this happened. To me, this is a affecting my ability to work under you. What can we do about this? This is what I need from you. That's what we mean by making yourself understood. Tell them exactly what it is that you need from them. Again, it's not about a relationship with them. It's about tell me the facts and then I'll make the decision and let's keep moving. The other good thing about Reds is that if there's a problem or if there's an issue, they want results. If you come to them and say, okay, listen, I need a new computer, or there's a class that I want to take that I think is going to help me developmentally and to do my job better. They'll say, okay, that's great. Then they're going to want to know what's the result. Did that help you? Was it effective? What did you learn from it? Be prepared to tell them what you learned. Be prepared, but again, keep it short, keep it concise. And lastly, don't take things personally. So moving on, let's take a look at our yellow bosses. Yellows are skilled communicators who can persuade others to their side. They are good at delivering bad news well. And they also like being in the limelight. They're positive and they want everyone to have fun at work. And it's very important to yellow bosses to be liked by their staff and their peers. Now, the challenge with yellow bosses is keeping them engaged. In order to keep them engaged, you need to be warm and friendly. They're focused on relationships. Remember, these are relationship-oriented extroverts. So that means they don't like grumpy people. And so when you've got negative people, it does affect them. It's like kryptonite to a yellow boss, and they will deflate. Then they will get into a bad mood. They don't like it. They like everything to be happy and positive. The sunshine always shines for the yellow people. They always look on the positive side. They are very optimistic. When you come to them with a problem, and that's another thing, they don't really like problems. They don't like conflict. But if you do have to present a problem to a yellow boss, you want to kind of sell it to them. These people you want to sell it to. You want to present it to a way that's like, hey, this is what's happened, but I have a solution for it. And that's another thing. Bring them solutions. They will handle problems, but they don't like negativity. If you can present the problem to them, say, this is what's happened. This is what I think we need to do. I think that this will resolve it. Here's the solution. They'll be much more amenable to handling the problem. Like Reds, yellow bosses don't like the small details. They get very bored. Yellows are future oriented. They're visionaries. They take a look at the big picture. They don't sweat the details. That's for blue and green to handle. More detail oriented people, but that is not a yellow person's bag at all. Another thing about yellows is they do like small talk. They want to know who their people are. They want to get to know you. And so when they come back from a vacation, don't be surprised if your yellow boss will tell you all about what happened on their vacation or the big adventure that they had. And then they may turn around and tell you, how did it go for you? Don't be a cold fish. Respond to your yellow boss. Don't just come back and say, oh, it went well. I reorganized my cabinets or I worked on my life goals. Give a little more detailed. Force yourself, in the case of the blues and the reds, to be a little bit more personable. Another big don't for a yellow is don't criticize your boss in front of others. Like I said, they don't like negativity. And last is don't waste their life on theoretical discussions. Theories and data are not fun for yellows. They get bored and they just check out. They like to have fun. If they tell jokes that are good jokes, you can laugh. If they're not respectable jokes, then out of integrity, you won't react to it. But just understand that they're very personable people. They like to have fun at work. The big issue with greens are that they are relationship-oriented introverts. The biggest thing about them is they like stability. They do not like change, and they don't like confrontation. Also, as leaders, they still want to see themselves as part of the group. They're in it with the team. They're down in the trenches with the team. They don't see themselves as elevated over the team. They're right there with them. They want to be part of them. Make sure you don't confuse green with red. Don't act like an alpha. It does not go over well with them. Don't try and provoke an argument. You have some personality types that do like arguments. They like to talk about the facts. They want to discuss it. Debating is just a natural progression of disseminating information, but that does not work well with an alpha. You'll be seen as someone who's a troublemaker and hard to work with. They will perceive you negatively, and you don't want them. The other thing is don't demand an answer with them. So what do you do with a green? They're not real fast about making decisions. They don't like change. So in order for you to present ideas about change, what you have to do is break it down and discuss the details with them slowly. Talk about it as if you were planning a vacation with them. Make it palatable for them. Don't ask yes or no questions because that's too demanding for them. Instead, come about it a little bit more softly and say something like, well, what do you think about this proposal? When do you think we could implement it? You're getting a conversation going with them so that they can just gently ease into the bathwater, basically, or into the pool. Let me quickly talk about blue bosses. These are your task-oriented introverts. So these people are extremely detail-oriented. Usually when you got a blue boss, these people are specialists, a technical specialist. So they're engineers, they're doctors, they're lawyers, and they're people who have a specific skill set and they're good at it. And so they have a lot of knowledge. So when you come to them for an explanation, they will give it to you and with details and facts, and they will explain it thoroughly to you so you can understand it. And they will not make a decision without consulting all the facts. They're ridiculously thorough. When you're dealing with a blue boss, make sure that you are ridiculously well prepared. You need to have not only your documentation, your research, but if there was footnotes, research that you could have also read, make sure you read that too. You have it all well prepared. Read the footnotes, check all that stuff out too. That's important because they will ask you those details. So make sure you dig out all the details. Be prepared to talk about it. And if you can't answer it, you may have to admit, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the Japanese that it was written in, and I could not get a really good translation. Therefore, I don't have all those details. I do apologize. They'll understand. Then they want proof of your ideas will work. You have to be thorough. You have to come up with a well thought out plan with the details so that they can make a decision. If you don't, they will reject it. When you are in a meeting, stick to the agenda. Do not skip things in the agenda. Go down each point as it's listed on the agenda. And lastly, be thorough. Understand you will get questioned by a blue boss. They will ask you for specific details and they will dissect everything down to the microcosms. They are incredibly detailed people. Once you understand that that's how they work and that's what's expected, do you understand that they will scrutinize all your work? So that is the difference between task-oriented and introverted. These, I hope, are some really good ideas that you can present to your students to help them understand the differences between task-oriented and relationship-oriented, extroverted versus introverted, and how those differences really oppose one another and how to handle it when you find yourself dealing with a boss who's opposite of you. If it's truly bad behavior, make sure you document it, and then that way it can be reported to HR.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.